Okay, seriously. So no, I know I can try to read it correctly. Morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us this morning. When Joe invited the rest of us to comment on how we thought that understanding myth could be implemented in the world around us, because of my legal background, my first thought was the presence of myth in the American justice system. Actually, I can read that. Well, no, I can't. I'm at that age, you know? Okay. And by the way, by the justice system, I'm talking specifically about the way our courts operate. I'm not talking about the overall idea of democracy in general. I would consider that part of the American founding myth. Scholars have also called this idea the Edenic myth, or the quest for paradise is another way they've put that. But getting back to our legal system, which, like those of other English-speaking countries, is a system of common law. This is different than civil law, which is the non-English-speaking countries have. Not surprisingly, it did come from England, and I would be so bold as to say that our legal system's mythopraxy came straight out of the tales of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. This is not an original thought. It was one of my law professors who initially told me this, that attorneys were the modern-day equivalent of knights. In a flash, I understood the archetype and why I had spent so much time in the career services office in tears. I really did enjoy law school, but I just could not envision myself as an attorney. Unfortunately for me, this revelation occurred after I had graduated with my JD, had sat at the bar, so it was a little late for me to reconsider beginning a legal education. But that's not the case today. I've noticed in researching this paper, I came across a variety of websites that advise potential law students to think twice about entering the practice of law. They all contain very similar themes. If you want to go to law school thinking that you can save the world, which I would call the Atticus Finch effect, or at the other end of the spectrum, make a lot of money, reconsider. It's not like they show it on TV. And this would have been really helpful. If you do not enjoy conflict, this is not the field. Yeah. Okay. Also, I want to whittle down even further. The versions of the Arthurian legend that I'm talking to are those, the English language tradition from Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur and T.H. White's Once and Future King. Primarily because in those texts, it's when King Arthur and Camelot are the center of the tales. In the French and German romances, the action mostly focuses on the exploits of the knights and their quests far away from Arthur's court. And by the way, Malory finished Le Morte d'Arthur while he was in prison. Just a footnote, okay. So in these two tales, appealing to the American concept of meritocracy, according to both Malory and White, Arthur did not know his father nor his royal destiny until he pulled the sword out of the stone. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, in a pact with Merlin, placed him in the care of Sir Ector, who is actually Sir Kay's father, for safekeeping while he was growing up. And that's actually how Sir Kay became the seneschal. Sir Ector asked him to do that since he had raised Arthur as a boy. And seneschal, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah, it's sort of like a chief of staff. Okay. Now, as legend had it, in Arthur's time, if an individual was accused of a crime, he or she would have a knight joust with the accuser, or, of course, the accuser's champion, in the court of honor. The belief was that the forces of righteousness, i.e. God, would not allow a knight fighting on the side of right to be defeated. The fairness of this approach eventually became suspect, however, because the person with access to the best knight would almost certainly be the victor. Sound familiar? However, at the same time, Arthur's court was also home to the Round Table, where knights discuss and decide issues among themselves, all on an equal basis. As obviously, there was no head of the table. So why is this important? Why should we care what myth or legend our legal system is based on? One of our professors here at Pacifica, Glenn Slater, you may be familiar with, stated the reason well when he described James Hillman's primary goal as being the application of psychological insight into culture as a way of reversing the psychic deadening of the world and recovering a sense of anima mundi, or the world soul. Furthering that thought, I say it is because if we know what myth or archetype our legal system is based on, then we can judge when or if that myth or archetype still works or needs to be changed. I would argue that although in some situations one still needs a knight in shining armor to protect one's rights, in many situations this archetype no longer works. Because keep in mind, what do knights leave behind? Scorched earth. And this may not be the best way to settle family disputes, for one thing, or any civil dealings where the parties are going to need to continue in any sort of working relationship after the dispute is settled. There are signs that the American justice system is moving more toward incorporating the round table archetype from the legend, rather than only that of the jousting knights. The use of alternative dispute resolution methods, such as mediation arbitration, are being used much more. Whether the reasons for it are the budgetary necessity or for the good of the parties, it is a reality. Also, there are professional organizations, the Inns of Court is one, that promote civility in the practice of law. Finally, there is much more evidence that there is a small but growing movement of a more holistic approach to the practice of law. It is my belief and great hope that these round table attributes will become more common practice in the legal profession. If so, this would go a long way toward untarnishing the image of the attorneys in our country and furthering Pacifica's goal of tending to the soul in the world.